Welcome to the BYOB podcast. Today I have a guest who is a bit of a family friend, almost, kind of, and
Partially, at least.
partially, almost. We'll
Yeah.
explain that in a moment. But Samuel Power, has been introduced to me through one of our good friends, Michael Kenihan, who I've worked with for so long that he almost seems like a family friend. I wanted to bring him on the show because he's got a unique sort of way of going about his business that I think is really going to be interesting to those people interested in finance, mortgage broking, property, which pretty much everyone is in Australia. So, welcome, Sam, to the show.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Really appreciate you having me on. And yeah, I'd say family friend, at least by 1 degree of separation. So for anyone listening that knows Michael, I'm actually his son-in-law. So a reasonable connect, at least by one person or another.
Yeah, we'll get Mike on the show at some stage. I mean, he has to come on. I'm sure we've messaged him. He
Oh,
probably hasn't come back to me yet, but he's too busy. But we'll get him on the show. Then we can compare episodes and see who was better. So,
it'd be chalk and cheese. Michael would blow me out of the water. But keep listening.
he does like talking, so I better actually get some extra time in my diary. So let's start with what you do today, and then we're going to delve back into the past because that's what I found really interesting when we had that session. I'm like, I really didn't know any of this stuff about you because it's difficult to get on one page. So let's start with what you do now. Just give everyone a bit of a spiel.
Absolutely. So right now, I'm a finance specialist for persons and businesses, where we look at maximising their property outcomes. It's all based around having a finance strategy that allows them to achieve their property goals at the end of the day. So that's people who are entering the market, looking to build an investment portfolio, or even people that are dealing with complex entities like companies, trusts, self-managed super funds, just to make sure they have all the right information, have the best options available, and therefore maximize return on investment. And putting a lot of money into houses these days, you really want to make sure you're making the right choice.
Mm. And so in that process, you're giving advice and you're also accessing the capital as well. Is that correct?
Spot on. So, depending on what the customers are looking to do, our clients are quite varied. We'll walk them through sort of an overarching methodology of making sure that the strategy applies, whether that be releasing equity from existing property, maximizing capital they have, leveraging government schemes that are available to them. So, quite a myriad of things we do, but it all comes down to making sure that their personal circumstances applied to just the most prudent strategy that they have, whether it be leveraging this or utilizing that or taking cash or capital. So again, we make sure that they have all the options available and understand the risk costs involved to make an informed decision, because at the end of the day, it's all about education. And at the
Mm.
end of it comes that finance and banking relationship, which we also negotiate on.
Interestingly enough, the reason why we sort of started talking it was regarding our mutual friend, and
Mhm.
then we were talking about the experience I had buying an office in my self-managed super fund and how I literally, as a fairly reasonably educated person, had no idea. Like it was so difficult. Compared to buying residential, I had no idea how difficult it was, and I could have used some education advice. I accessed some sources, but it wasn't quite what I needed it to be. So
Well, that's thanks, I think, to my experience previously. So I've worked across a number of different lenders, and I'm sure we'll get to it in a bit more detail later. But across all of Victoria and Tasmania, then also a stint up in Sydney. The two biggest financial markets in Australia are dealing with a large variety of lenders and complex lending scenarios. When you hear people talk and you say, "Oh, look, I'm thinking of doing X. Can you do it?" They go, "Oh, yeah, we can." The real question might be, do you
that
have
was exactly what
experience
happened.
doing this?
Yeah, which I
Is
didn't
this something
ask.
you're experienced in, that you're proficient in? And then you might find like, oh, look, we do it here and there. Oh, look, I've done it once before, or whatever it may be. And you can get a bit of a feel for whether or not someone's actually going to be the best person, because a lot of brokers can do these things, but they don't necessarily have the previous experience and expertise, and really understand what can be leveraged and what can't. And then, of course, there's 45 to 65 different lenders that we work with. Therefore, there's 45 to 65 different credit policies, products,
Mm.
features. Again, it's really important that the broker does that work to make sure the customer gets the right outcome at the end of the day. Not naming any names or anything, but your experience is maybe someone that is sort of delving into it and could have been improved, and even just with the expectation setting,
Mm.
um, letting customers know exactly what they're in for, what they'll have to do up front, But at the end of the day, knowing that my job is to actually make that whole process as easy and as light touch as possible for the client.
Yeah. And look, the things you talked to me about, I was like, wow, I didn't even know that existed. You introduced yourself as a mortgage broker, but then when I asked you more questions, I'm like, wow, this guy's got so much experience, way more than the average mortgage broker, which is what I end up going through, someone who, and for them, that they can only know what they know and they don't know what they don't know.
Exactly right. Unless you've worked in finance, there is no way you can expect to know all those intricacies, the rules, the regulations, and the requirements of many different lenders. At the end of the day, they all function under responsible lending practices, but
Mm,
even the inner workings of that is something that the average person, whether they've bought and sold property previously or not, it's a whole different kettle of fish. You're a marketing expert. I don't know anything about marketing. So, when I need help with those sort of items, I go to an expert. That's what a finance broker does. You hit a really good point where, they go, oh, well, you're a mortgage broker, you're a finance broker. At the end of the day, that's the very last step in the process.
mm,
And which lender you go with, and to a certain extent, what rate you go on as well. People seem to be obsessed with their interest rate, which, to be fair, is what they hear in the news. But it's actually the only thing that changes over the life of a loan. So it's largely irrelevant because in a couple of months it could be going down or it could be going up, or
mm,
in a year or two's time, one lender might have moved somewhere and the other lender hasn't. You can always assess your options and look for something better. That's why I think something we spoke about at length was that strategy, really
mm,
making sure people knew what was available to them, what the consequences and costs are, and not to overload someone with information, but just really ensure they're having an informed decision about what is often the biggest purchase of their life at the end of the day. It's not every day you spend anywhere from 500 to multi-millions of dollars on a single item being
yeah,
property.
yeah.
And people go, oh, look, I bought this at auction. I was doing this. I'm paying this. And you're going, hang on, why did you do that? Oh, dad said I should do it this way. Oh, okay, is he in finance? Oh no, he's an ex-cop, or he did this, that, and the other. Or yeah, he was in banking, but 30 years ago. And, look, things are a little bit different these
Yeah,
days.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, even just getting the money out of my account to pay the deposit, I was like, how do I do it? I had to go into a
Trust
branch.
accounts,
I didn't even know
transferring,
whether there was branches anymore. I mean, it was really quite fascinating. But we'll get
you
to that.
transfer
Now,
over $10,000, you're getting
yeah,
flagged for anti-money laundering practices. There's all
yes,
sorts of things
they
people don't
literally
need
called me
for
in the
spending
bank.
money.
Yeah, they called me in the bank. I was standing at the bank and they called me and said, "There's this transaction in your account. Is that you?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm standing in front of the teller." Like, it was
I've had people
fascinating.
be called in to make sure they won't be coerced into putting funds across
Oh,
because it was
really?
an unreal transaction, and the customer took a little bit of offence, but I think once they understood it, it was
Oh,
okay
I'd
from the
rather them be
branch.
secure and
Going,
protect my money. So yeah,
"Oh,
yeah,
exactly right." I said, "Look, at the end of the day, you want the bank to be double checking those things because the one time it's not you and it's not for the right reason,
yeah,
you want them to catch it. So it's not
yeah.
actually a bad thing that money gets held up or questioned."
Yes, yes, I liked it. All right, let's go back. I want to hear a bit more about your past because we've sort of touched on a few things that I think people might be interested in. So, but my first question is always, what was your first paid job?
First paid job was
Barman,
when
paper round,
no,
lemonade stand, man.
milkshake at a cafe, so almost lemonade stand.
Okay.
I went around at the age of about 12, 13. I think I lied and said I was 14 and 9 months to make sure I could be paid, but ultimately it was a cash job anyways. But I walked around with a little CV I wrote up about all the lawns I'd mowed and all the things I'd done, helping walk the dogs and do my chores around the house, etc. And walked into the butcher and offered to sweep their floors, and walked into cafes all around and offered to clean toilets and do whatever I could to earn a bit of pocket money. And one lady at a cafe in Mont Albert actually said, actually, we need someone to make milkshakes. Do you know how to milkshake? Oh, mate, the best milkshakes you've ever had. She goes, how do you do it? I thought, oh, haven't thought that far ahead, believe it or not, at 12 years old. Maybe something I deal with as
Uh,
a, whatever age I am now, centuries later. But yeah, got a job mixing milkshakes. She goes, well, it's very simple, young man. You put in the ice cream, you put in the milk, and you put in whatever flavor they want. Do you think you can handle that? So, oh, yeah, don't worry. I've got this covered. She goes,
Strews
do you know
gone
what
everywhere.
I said, what? So yeah, it
Uh,
was cash from there, and then actually worked in hospitality for a decent while to pay my way through finishing off school, going to university, and all those fun things that we all do.
yeah. Now there's a bit of don't gloss over it. There's a bit of university here. Let's go through it. We just start off.
So it started off doing commerce arts because I had no idea what I wanted to do, and that's what all my mates are doing. So I thought I'll apply for that. went a bit and found myself going, well, not really making a whole lot of money going to university, but I do make a decent amount of money working 70 hours a week, waiting tables and doing bar shifts at night, and actually decided to pull away from uni after about a year. Of course, after the census states and all the HEX payments came through,
Oh
like the old
no.
prudent financial manager I was back then.
Yeah.
But then after a bit of consideration and after I'd sort of, built myself up a little bit financially and was comfortable with the rent I was paying and everything, I ended up going back and doing my advanced diploma in financial planning, which I'd say was my first real introduction to getting better outcomes for people and really helping people along their way. And that took care of things like, your risk and your insurance, but also managed funds and securities. And that's something I really loved. I love the numbers, I love the analytics, and I loved understanding risk. And that got me into my first job, which was actually at a life insurer in a retentions team, helping people understand what their life policies covered them for, and if they were to cancel, what the consequences are, and was really my first job in financial services overall as well.
Hmm. Did you like that? Did you enjoy talking to customers and being with people and
Loved it. That
mm,
was really something that I enjoyed. There was certainly circumstances where people would say, "Well, look, I've sold this property and I'm debt free and I'm about to retire and I've got X in super. I want to cancel my life policy." And you go, "Well, mate, yeah, fair enough. Of course you do. That makes perfect sense."
oh,
Then there are
stop
other
it.
times, yeah, well, and there was other times where people would just look, maybe someone's lost a job or they've had another kid, and then suddenly money's a bit tight, and they're going,
Mm,
"Oh, this life policy. I got that years ago. I don't even remember what it was for." And my first question, or even not even a question, I would just tell them, say, listen, I just want to let you know, as part of our duty of care, what your life policy covers you for and what will happen should something happen to you. And I go, look, it covers you in the event of death and it covers you for this amount after we've done all of our privacy checks, of course. And people, I would say easily 60% of the time would go, oh, I didn't realize that. That's actually really important. By the way, our mortgage is bigger and we've got two extra kids now, and my
oh
partner's not
wow.
working or whatever it may be. And that's when we go, right, that's worth a conversation with your financial advisor because
Yeah.
your needs have changed. It just really highlighted to me how many people were just swimming through this absolute ocean of information.
Mm,
These people are lawyers, doctors, chippies, sometimes in finance themselves, but just in the wrong area of finance.
yeah.
And it really started to highlight how out at sea a lot of people were about really important financial decisions, and building that understanding of going, hey, it's actually something that's really important. Educating people and making sure
Mm,
they have that decent level of financial literacy is just paramount in this day and age, because if they had cancelled it, if they hadn't have known, and then something
mm.
did happen, the life insurers pay something like 97% of all claims. It's a huge amount,
Oh
and that's
wow.
when people
Did not know
really
that.
need it. Yeah, well, yeah, again, if you don't know it, you don't know it, and you can't blame people for doing marketing degrees and not knowing the intricacies of life, right?
Just a true story to highlight that. I know we're talking about other things, but
Mm,
it's an interesting. I mean, it's about education, right? And one of my friends, we went to kindergarten together, primary school, knew him all my life. He passed away a few years ago, and he passed away one thing because he never really took care of himself, his health,
mm,
but he never took care of his finances or anything else. And he actually, when he got diagnosed, because he wouldn't go to the doctor, he was so far gone that they actually paid out his life insurance on a policy he didn't even know he had. If he knew he had it, he would have cancelled it and kept the money because that's sort of what it was like. But he
mm,
was so bad at paperwork that he actually never cancelled it. So they paid him out while he was still alive. And the best thing about that whole circumstance is he's seeing the joy on his face of being able to buy things for his parents, for his twin brother, for the people he loved around him, and give it to them and have them and experience the joy of that process before he left. And it was, and it was an accident, and it's quite, but if he knew and he cancelled it, then it would have been he actually would have left debt behind. So it would have been actually quite difficult for his parents who both don't work. It is an important thing, so it's worth highlighting.
absolutely, and it's such a big shock to family when anyone gets diagnosed with something terminal or they, in fact, pass away.
Mm,
It's not always just, "Oh, my health's good." It's people get hit by drunk drivers, or they're,
mm,
something completely out of the ordinary occurs. That's when you really need it. And even sort of a mantra or something I'd always discuss with those customers they sort of say, well, what happens if I get to this age and I haven't used it? And I said, well, Matt, that's actually the best possible outcome. If we look at your
That's right.
premiums and what you're paying over the next 40 plus years
You
until
don't want
you're
to use it. It's
65
one
or
thing you don't want to
70,
cash in. Yeah.
yeah, it's $30,000. If you could pay someone today $30,000 to guarantee you would make it until 65 with a clean bill of health, when you put it into the context, it's actually something you really don't want to use
No.
because
Mm.
you guess what, mate? You won't see this money anyways.
It's just a mindset thing. It's education, like you said, and it's how you explain things. And I feel, look, just to be honest, sometimes I talk to financial, brokers about that. I feel like they're just trying to sell me insurance, and then it makes me negative towards listening to their advice. Having someone who you can explain it in those sort of, easy to understand contexts and make it real for me is really valuable.
Jargon infuriates me for that exact reason. So many times people will say, "Oh, look, I looked at it, but it was all just too complex, or it was too hard, or this, that, and the other."
Mm,
And I have actually gone and spoken to people. I've spoken to professionals, sometimes even one or two as well. And again, it's just been not clearly explained. It is complex, but it doesn't have to be complicated at the end of the
mm,
day. It can
mm,
be simplified. They just need to know the facts and they need to know the proven information about what they're getting themselves into at the end of the day.
mm.
But that does not have to be explained in a way with all sorts of lingo and this, that, and the other. They're straightforward principles and products. People just need the right guidance and the right
It's
person
the
to educate
guidance,
them.
yeah.
So they're making that, as we've sort of said it about 1,000
Mm,
times already, it's an
mm,
informed decision.
mm. It's interesting because there was a big change in that industry several years
Social
ago.
reforms, I think, did a lot for that, definitely.
Yeah, and I think it's greatly improved the industry in terms of, well, from my perspective as a customer, because there's a lot more rigor. You have to be a lot more trained. I mean, you've got a master's degree in this, so you want to talk to someone who didn't just do a 6-week course and then he's giving you advice. You want to talk
Mm.
to someone who's, you know, dedicating their professional life to helping people in this area and being knowledgeable. So,
Yep,
I think that those changes were hard in the industry, but I think they were quite good in terms of just having people go, do I really want to be in this or do I not? And the people who stayed in, I think, are probably, the better ones. I don't know, but I presume they would be the people willing to put in the time to get re-educated, do those courses, and and so
absolutely.
forth.
Yeah, spot on. And it comes down to people's interpretation of compliance. I think it's a good thing at the end of the day. And I
Mm,
think, yes, regulation can be frustrating and sometimes the intention isn't exactly achieved, don't get me wrong. But at the end of the day, if there's increased regulation with the sole purpose of getting better outcomes for Australians, that's not a bad thing.
yeah,
And that's how, when I was actually working for banks, managing broker businesses myself, when we talk about increased compliance and why we had certain rules and people would blow up about it, that was always a good litmus test of who's doing the right thing and
yeah,
who maybe needs a bit more coaching around why this is important. If someone's jumping up and down about having to justify why someone's going with a certain bank and a certain loan, it's like, well, mate, no. You should be able to clearly justify that fairly easily, but that shouldn't be a problem at all. It should be
yeah,
very clear and concise about why that's the best bank for that customer.
yeah.
And I think that's also why the best interest duty was brought in after the Royal Commission into Banking and Finance as well. And again, a really positive thing. Brokers have to work in the best interest of their customers. A
Yeah.
lender or a branch doesn't have that same regulation, doesn't mean they're not doing the right thing. But again, enhanced regulation, I think, actually adds credibility because it means the people who can't handle that and aren't doing the right thing are pushed out, which is not
Sorry.
bad in my opinion.
So can you just repeat that? So brokers are under this new regulation, but
Yep. Best
branch.
interest duty.
So the branch, if they work in a branch, then they're not
They're
under
not
that same
regulated
regulation.
under best interest duty. So a bank will always have responsible lending, and we're also involved in responsible lending because ultimately we're preparing the credit proposals and submitting the applications on behalf of the customer to the bank. But best interest duty was brought in after the Royal Commission. So they're looking into the poor behaviour by banks and brokers got the increased commission. But what we've actually seen is now more customers than ever utilising brokers for their finance because they have that trust, because they are getting
Ah,
clear options. So over 71% of residential mortgages are written through brokers currently.
really?
So people
Interesting.
don't realise it's, 7 out of 10 plus
Yeah.
that's actually written by brokers, and that's grown from about 65% in that time. And I personally believe that the increased service and increased care that's been brought
Mm,
in by interest duty, the majority of people are already doing these things and already
Yeah.
acting in the right way. But again, it comes down to that credibility, and it's something you can just point to and say, well, listen, we operate like X, we have a best interest duty. That means we are regulated and we'll lose our licenses
Mm.
if we don't act in your best interest at all times.
Yeah.
That includes conflict disclosures and all sorts of additional items as well. So it's a really far-reaching, broad regulation, but
Mm.
with really specific requirements on a number of items, which,
Yeah.
as you said, it just gets better outcomes. So happy days.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And I mean, you worked at banks, so it's probably very useful for you to you've been on both sides of the equation. So
Yeah.
it's that sort of knowledge portal. So tell me a bit about that. What was it like working for the banks? And tell which ones did you worked for a couple of, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So my first job in retail lending, which is consumer mortgages and so buying homes, not buying commercial properties, was actually at Suncorp Bank. So I went over to London and was still working in life insurance, worked life insurance in London, came back, realised I need to get a job, ended up falling into a business development manager role at Suncorp Bank. This was back 8+ years ago now.
So in Melbourne, I thought they were more Queensland based, but they're no, they're
Yeah,
really.
absolutely. Queensland-based bank, but we had an office at 530 Collins Street, I think it was.
Oh,
Maybe
nice spot.
address is wrong, but yeah, it was good office. Loved it. Great team. Immediately had a portfolio of over 1,000 brokers that I was managing and training
Wow.
and making sure that one, they were sending us the right business, and that they also knew what business to send and what we were looking for, and how to utilize our rates and policies. I just fell in love with it immediately. You can help people grow businesses in those roles. You can get some really great outcomes from customers, and there's also that business to business methodology that I hadn't worked in. I'd always been customer facing in hospitality, of course, and then in life insurance was customer focused, and then working between businesses and being that intermediary was fantastic, because especially when there was someone that, we needed to look at income in a common sense way, or there was a reasonable exception for someone that wouldn't be able to settle a home, or wouldn't be able to do all these things that would cost them tens of thousands of dollars. We're able to help work with the bank and work with the internal stakeholders, work with the broker business and the customer to get their loan approved, and just fell in love with it. Then ended up getting poached across to another bank called BYOB Bank. I was actually the first staff member in all of Victoria and Tasmania for that lender, and
Oh,
now they sponsor the Melbourne Demons. They
oh, really?
merged
Oh, I
with
haven't come
another
across them.
lender as well. Yeah, they actually sponsored them the year that they won the premiership, so they were all patting each
Oh,
other on the back. Marketing department, that was absolute one of the best marketing decisions I've ever seen made by their team.
yeah.
Was they sponsored Melbourne Demons. I don't think they were any good, and then they went and won the premiership, and their Beyond Bank was everywhere suddenly in
That is
Victoria. And
gold. That is gold.
absolutely, Shane was the guy that brought it in, or was one of the main architects behind it. I
Uh,
won't say his last name, but yeah, magnificent work from that gentleman. I started with, there was maybe a handful of brokers that knew about us, and I ended up building that portfolio to over 2,500 brokers just
oh,
in
wow.
Victoria,
Wow.
settling hundreds of millions of dollars for the lender, exceeding targets, which they were happy about. And it was actually, they're a mutual bank, so they're customer owned. You can't
Ah,
buy shares in them.
yeah.
Really good to experience a lender that give 9.5% of their profits back into the communities through their community partnership program with a lot of non-for-profit charities. Would put solar panels on their roof at work, and they were actually one of the first bank in Australia to be B Corp certified, which
Oh,
is a certification for doing right in the world and being sustainable and
yeah. Big Cop's
environmentally.
great. Wow, that's
Yeah,
amazing.
and
Who would have
yeah,
thought?
huge. Great learning experience. I had a great mentor, Darren McLeod was his name. He was a huge support of mine, and I got a lot of exposure to things like sitting on the pricing committee and working with Treasury for setting our rates for term deposits and the mortgages. And
Wow.
you got to see the balance between how money gets put into a bank and where they can leverage money from, like the RBA, and then how it's lent out to customers. And huge amount of education, huge amount of exposure, but ultimately, again, a bank that I loved working for, loved the people, loved the team. My loan is actually with Beyond Bank still to this
Oh, there you
day,
go.
years and years later. So from personal experience, I can say, both as a staff member and as a patron, as a customer, right attitude, right policy, a really interesting challenge to build a brand that had limited recognition, was only really known in brokers. There was no branch, there was no ATMs, nothing along those lines, and to build it from the ground up to the point where now we've got they have branches in the CBD. They've taken over a mutual bank that was based out of Sale, and now there's a physical footprint, and I think over 40 staff in Victoria today.
Oh, cool. But you didn't stay there.
Didn't stay
You moved
there.
on. Like
Yeah,
you're probably doing too
life
well.
when you're in a committed relationship, things happen. And not at the time, but now my lovely wife decided to go and get herself into medicine, as you do, Sydney.
Just to
So,
stick you with 6 years of medical university fees? Or...
look, it was her dream, and I sort of said when she goes, "Oh, look, is it worth moving up to Sydney for?" I said, "Darling, you're going to be helping people a lot more than I am and saving lives. I think that's a pretty good reason to
100%.
move up."
Yeah. Yeah.
Notwithstanding, it's been her dream since she was a young girl. So I said,
You're not,
"Listen,
not
whatever
actually
we have
going to
to
the
do."
back of the blocks, you're going to Sydney, you know?
Exactly. So don't worry. We ended up moving into Paddington. So I was sort of looking around, going, "Listen, it's not the worst thing in the world."
No, no. There's people buy houses in Sydney apparently, so kind of
Oh,
works.
no, ended up moving up to Sydney. I actually stayed with Beyond Bank and was flying back and forth
Oh,
between Melbourne and Sydney
yeah, no.
right in the middle of COVID. So we went through the long Melbourne lockdown and then went through the long Sydney lockdown.
Oh,
So we couldn't have
fantastic.
been more locked down. I think it was 183 days
And
just
you're still
before things
married, mate.
calmed down.
That is a testament to your relationship.
Oh, mate,
Nothing,
yeah, absolutely. We
you
actually
cope
weren't
with
married at
anything.
that point. We still went through with it. So we thought if we've
Yeah,
gone through this, well, we loved it. We were homebodies anyways. It was flying back and forth between Melbourne and Sydney, and someone would cough in Melbourne and it'd be shut down, and I'd have
yeah.
30 plus appointments booked over 3 or 4 days, and then they would all be cancelled and rebooked. And then someone would cough in
Wow.
Sydney. Guess what? You're not flying anywhere, buddy. Everyone's locked down again. So again, cancelling all the appointments. And I had a candid conversation with my manager at the time, Darren, and he just said, "Mate, can you be bothered with this?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "It's tough, and I think it's the right thing for the business to have someone on the ground in Melbourne." He goes, "I wholeheartedly agree with you,
What
mate,
a
but
good
we're
boss.
very appreciative."
What a great
He was
culture.
absolutely amazing, really
Yeah,
good mentor, pushed me, exposed me to a lot of things, and then at the end of it, he said, "Look, we agreed to 2 years originally. It's now been 2.5, so you've done your time as far as I'm concerned.
yeah.
Let's get you to the next
Isn't it
place."
isn't it just wonderful when you get these people in your life at work that just, you know, look after your best interest,
Oh,
you
the
do
right
better
manager,
business, you
the
do
right
great
team,
business. Yeah,
everything.
it's phenomenal. Mm.
And like, you see it all the time, people might move for a pay rise or do this and that, and they're just miserable because maybe they don't get along with a manager or there's not the values alignment or
Yeah.
whatever it may be. I've been mostly lucky in my time, that I've had some really great managers. Kelly, Darren, John was another guy at the
Mm.
the next place. Really great cultures at these great businesses. So I've been quite fortunate
And you
in
got
that regard.
Michael as a father-in-law. I mean, you can't go wrong. What have you done? You've been,
Exactly, mate, exactly. We've got the amount of knowledge I have around me, you'd sort of be a bit sad if I wasn't successful in my own business because you sort of go, "Mate, you had an
you have
unbroken
run.
boulevard of green lights of mentors and managers that you rely on. You bottled this. What's going on?" So, yeah, with
Uh,
with that amount of access to an intelligentsia far greater
yeah.
than mine, right? You do find that it's a lot easier to ask questions
You need
and
to be given that back at some stage.
yeah, exactly right. I'll take him out to dinner at some point. I'll bring over
No, I
fish and
mean, give it
chips.
to the next generation, like,
Oh, of
teaching them
course.
one
Oh,
day.
I'll try
One
what I can, but nobody wants to listen to me. So,
day. When you get a bit older, like, you get some grey whiskers, you'll get
oh,
onto
don't
that
worry about
bandwagon.
that. I'm having a severe retreat here, and then the greys are settling in quite nicely. So I don't know.
Working too
I'll
hard.
have to visit Ashley and
Now,
Martin. I'll get some hair dye or something.
yeah. Now, so let's pivot to, you've decided to leave, the safety of a, monthly check, from an income and go start your own business. So what spurred on that? Was that just a
Well, I'd actually
epiphany or?
eventually gone in my career, moved into fintech, and that was a new challenge. It was exciting, it was complicated, and there was a hell of a lot to learn. I felt really removed in that role from dealing with customers and making an
Mm,
impact directly. I wasn't really working with small businesses. I was consulting at an executive level to NAB and ANZ, and it was a really great role, again, with a lot of great people in those teams. But it just wasn't for me at the end of the day. So
mm.
once that finished up, I decided to take a bit of time and think things through and plan to take about 6 months off of work. After about a month, I realized that I was just way too bored and needed to have a project and get moving. And I sort of wrote two columns about what I'm good at and what I'm passionate about, as I'm sure a million different TikTok videos or Simon Sinek, YouTube clips
The
say to
wise,
do.
yeah.
Absolutely. And then I sort of realized that the things I love doing was having a positive impact on people, helping educate and getting better outcomes than what people would have got, getting them a better
Mm,
deal, for lack of a better phrase. And then the things that I'd done previously was credit policy, understanding risk, residential lending. We dabbled in commercial and SMSF through my exposure to another lender I worked at as well, and just sort of thought, well, I've managed, over 5,000, 6,000 brokers over the last 8 years across Melbourne and Sydney. Maybe it's something I need to look into myself, particularly with a lot of the relationships I had with accountants and financial planners and real estate agents and
mm,
development consultants as well. So I had all of the right ingredients to actually start a successful business. And it was our lovely friend and father-in-law, Michael Kenihan, that sort of just gave me one bit of advice. He said, is the best investment you will ever make, Sam, is an investment in yourself. You've
mm,
got the right work ethic and the right attitude to make it, and you should really consider it. And then, discussion with my partner, of course, Lucinda had to be involved in that. And we sort of agreed that she's got another year of study. We were financially in a position that we could take that risk to just go for it. And it's, I've sort of never looked back, to be honest.
mm. I think some things to take out of that is you were at the right time. Like you'd
Yep.
done enough work, like you'd worked hard for a lot of years
I
and
wasn't
gained the
in
knowledge.
an architecture firm or an electrician business in something I'd never done before.
Yeah.
I think something that was absolutely critical was a lot of previous experience.
Yeah. You've delved into the core of what you do rather than do
Mm.
something that was on the periphery of an interest level. The sort of business you started was one that you've already got the connections, you got the contacts, you got the knowledge. It's not difficult to see how that could work really well. So it's a smart move.
Absolutely.
It's not really gamble
Yeah.
at all.
Well, and then even considering sort of the positive externalities, maybe you'd call them. I'm building an asset. I can
Mm,
afford to do it for a couple of years, and if then I get into it and I have a reasonable level of success, but decide it's not for me, at least there'll be a return at the end of it as well.
yeah, yeah,
So those were considerations. The way brokers are remunerated is actually by the lenders as well. So there's no cost to customers in most cases.
mm,
There can be times where a fee is charged, but I normally will just do it based on what I can provide. So again, I like the idea that I could provide these services and have these conversations with a payment model that actually suited us as well,
mm,
and was able to do quite extensive planning and projections. As we sort of briefly touched on, I'd actually also done my master's in business administration, where I specialised in corporate finance. So again, I had a decent level of understanding of what I needed to be wary of, and what calculations and projections I need to put in place to have a reasonable forecast
mm,
with a decent amount of redundancy in it as well. So once I also did a fair bit of exploration and did those tests that everyone does to think, look, is this feasible? Will this work out? If it doesn't go all that well, how much is it going to stretch us? If it goes really well, what does that look like? And then you get really excited and then sort of
yeah,
have to bring yourself back to reality. Go, well, look, maybe I should do it on the worst case scenario, not
yeah,
making
yeah.
$1 million in your first month, which didn't happen, unfortunately. Again, leveraging off that experience, my education previously, and also having a lot of broker businesses and people I'd
Mm,
worked with for nearly a decade, being able to call them and just say, listen, here's what I'm thinking of doing. Do you have any advice for what I should consider in my first 6 months, and then in the first year and the first two
mm,
years? And
mm.
and again, the broker community is unbelievable in their ability to share information and work as a group. So even though technically I'd be a
Yeah,
competing
competitor.
business,
Yeah.
give me all the information in the world of going, mate, I really struggle with this. If you can get this on, you've had these conversations. And I think, again, having the right mentors, both personally through Michael, with things that might not be necessarily related to finance broking, but certainly running a business,
Mm,
and personally how to handle certain situations and pressures, but then also having people within the industry that can mentor me, where I can just say, oh, look, I'm thinking of doing this. Have you done that before? Even little simple things. Is letterbox drops worthwhile?
yeah.
You finding the digital marketing strategies working with you, and found that the marketing was actually the biggest thing everyone was getting wrong, which led me to a call to yourself. Thank God. And that put us again, you leveraging experience in areas that you have limited experience in is
Mm,
something that I think was really beneficial early doors as well. And ultimately gave me the confidence to pull the trigger because I had the plan it was double checked by people who knew a lot more about those things than me. And that gave me enough confidence to really work forward and take what is a very big risk, both
mm,
financially, personally, and otherwise.
mm. But the thing I liked about when we worked together was obviously you've got the runs on the board, you've got the education, you've got the experience, but not just that, is that, over the years you've built up this, great brand of reputation in the market because people aren't going to help you if you're not a good person, right? And obviously that just is a testament to who you are as a person. And really when in the marketing we're marketing people and
Mm,
you can't fake it. Like if you're just there to reap as much money out of people as possible, we wouldn't work with you for a start, but people see it and smell it. So the fact that you actually genuinely like people, and when you went away from working with people, it didn't fill your cup. It just
100%.
said, just do what you love and build a business around it. Like it's not a great secret, but it's sometimes hard to find that for some of our clients. But you've managed to do that successfully. And how's it been? Like, are you working harder? Are you working longer hours? Is it
Working the same
rewarding?
amount of hours. Again,
Same?
something that
Yeah.
was a lot of the people at banks and that I'd worked with previously and people in my life that knew me personally, there's a hell of a lot of work you do as a self-employed person. You wear many hats, you work many hours. And very early on, I was hearing it quite often that people would say, well, mate, you were working until 10, 12 o'clock at night and then starting again at 4 a.m. in the morning for a bank where you didn't have any skin in the game and you weren't getting paid any overtime. So there was no worry about having to work hard or work anything. It was just this time I'd be working for myself. And
Yeah.
again, you have that asset, it's a bit of pride. I know pride can be a dangerous thing, but you actually start feeling proud that you're building something that you're investing in yourself, and at the end of the day it's going to provide for my family, it provides for my wife and I. She works, of course. We've got a lovely relationship in that regard where it's really equal and mutual, but you still want to make sure that if anything happened you'd
Mm.
be able to make sure there's food on the table and the bills are paid,
Yeah.
etc.,
Well,
etc.
those 8 kids you're planning to have, so it's
No comment. Again, it's being able to do those things with that same methodology I had throughout my career in helping businesses myself. Was it's
mm,
just be honest and be genuine, and I'm just there to help. If
mm,
it's a no, I will tell you it's a no quickly, and if it's a yes, I'll work with you to make sure that yes is there. I apply that exact same methodology with clients today.
mm,
It's really straightforward, and if you don't actually have that honesty or you don't have that right intention, people see right through it, and I think it falls apart very
yeah,
quickly.
it does.
So I'm lucky I get to do that every day.
Mm. And one thing you mentioned there was, I think, quite interesting is that you work the same hours regardless of whether it was for yourself. I actually find that I'm kind of the same. Like when I worked for businesses, I was very committed to those companies. Wouldn't take sickies. I'd always be, try and do the best thing by the company. And as soon as the company, like I lost that sort of the culture changed, I didn't love working there. I couldn't work there anymore, and I had to leave and go somewhere else. I do work a lot now, but I kind of used to work a lot then anyway. So it's probably more just the constantness of the pressure. It's switching
Yeah,
off is a bit more difficult because you are the one and only. That's probably the only difference. But then you get the rewards as well of building a business. So
for sure. And I'd even have those stresses when I was working as a salaried employee. And not that I advocate for this at all, but as you were doing the same, working long hours, like I'd even be talking to friends that were working till 6:30, 7 o'clock at night, going, oh, mate, you shouldn't be doing that. You finish, if you're paid until 5, you leave at 5, knowing that I'd worked until like 1 a.m. the night before myself. So hypocrisy, thy name was Sam
yeah,
for a long time on that front.
yeah,
It's different pressures, but they're still the same ones. Certainly, financially is something I've experienced. It's something I expected, but again, there's not a guaranteed paycheck every week,
mm,
fortnight, or month. And there is that additional stress and pressure that certainly comes from, as you said, just being, the buck stops with you, and that's
mm,
it.
mm. Yeah, it's interesting. Now, one thing I like to ask, knowing what you know now, if you went back a couple of years when you were considering this, and let's say there was a friend talking to you, asking you, "Oh, you've done it? Should I do it?" What would be your golden advice? What would be the one piece of advice you'd give them?
Plan, and plan again. I think that there's no harm in getting bogged down in details before you trigger on these things. I did a full business plan. I did a marketing plan with yourself. I've done growth plans as a side to that. I've done my customer relationship plans. I did plans around building up referrers. I spent a day one afternoon going through my phone and highlighting the friends and contacts that I thought, oh, I think they have a property. I think they might be looking to buy
Mm.
soon, and had a plan even just around the contacts in my phone and about who I'd reach out and let them know and offer to help. If you start these things and you just have a basic business plan or an idea of what you want to do, I think that's fraught with danger. I'm actually quite risk averse, even though I deal in, investing in
I
property
can tell.
and leveraging money and millions of dollars and things like that. But making sure it was really sure about what I wanted to do, how I wanted to do it, but leaving plenty of room to be agile, because half of that plan's changed in
Oh,
one way or another. Little
100%.
changes, big
Mm.
changes, right? Especially on the marketing side, thinking, oh yeah, I'll do this on digital, and I'll do a Facebook here, and I'll do a
I'm waiting
this,
for the
that, and the other
second blog,
there.
mate.
And then 30 minutes speaking, I thought, oh, hang on a second, I'm gonna throw that out the window. And you said, oh, have you done a marketing plan? Can you send it? I thought, oh, maybe. I said, oh, look, don't bother reading it too much. I think we should better just start from scratch answering. Thank
Uh,
God we did. And leveraging those around you, as I've leveraged yourself, Michael, again, previous colleagues and
mm.
previous business partners as well. Just getting as much information and talking doesn't hurt to have a chat. And often you're catching up with coffee or
Oh,
having a meal or a beer with these people, anyways. Run it by them. The
yeah.
people around you are going to be so keen to see you succeed.
I found the same thing. Whenever I've started a new business, I've just reached out to my network and they've been so helpful and so generous with their time. And the more successful, the more generous they seem. It's really quite interesting.
You feel
That,
guilty almost because you think,
yeah,
oh, I don't deserve this. It's
I'm only
such,
buying a
this.
coffee or a beer. I'm like, can I buy you I don't know, a new
Yeah,
car or,
distilling 30 years plus of experience into an
uh,
hour and teaching you lessons that they've taken years and years to learn, and sometimes learned some really hard lessons doing
mm,
it with really dire consequences. You get that knowledge in, a 30, 40-minute conversation just by
yeah,
asking a question.
yeah.
It's invaluable.
I think that's actually really good advice is, just reach out because the worst they can
Mm.
say is I'm a bit busy and not now. But
Yeah.
more often than not, they'll make some time and,
Oh, I've even
be
had people
gracious.
go, "Look, I can't help you, but I know this guy that works in X,"
100%.
or
Mm,
"I've got a lady who's now the CEO of this, that, and the other that'd love to help out. I'll
yeah.
organise a coffee with you." And I'm suddenly getting messages from CEOs of massive non-for-profits and other businesses talking about how they operate and the needs of their members and how they're all looking to buy property and that they have commercial property needs. And I'm thinking it was
Mm,
just someone wasn't able to help me, but again, their extended network,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
more than happy to help.
Yeah, just be a good person. People will help you really. It's like, that's why I just give a bit more and take a bit less, and people will
Just be
go out of the way to
grateful
help you.
for it as well. They're not doing it necessarily to be thanked. They're doing it because they like to help themselves. But
Yeah.
even you'd finish up and I'd write decent emails and write thank you letters, and
Mm.
even you can barely read my handwriting, but sent some people notes just being really appreciative of your time. I went, mate, no one does that. What's wrong with you? I said, "Oh, I'm
But
just
it's
really grateful for all the lessons.
and gratitude. That's the perfect term. Is it's because and I
Important.
think that's the thing is the more successful are, the more grateful they are for the help that someone else gave them, and they're just
Mm.
returning the favor. So,
Well, that's
um,
it.
as we finish up, I'd just like to, where do we get in contact with you? How do we, if some people are interested in hearing your story or getting in touch for, some advice, where do you want them to go?
So I've got my own website. They can just Google Samuel Power Loan Market is my business. That'll come up with my LinkedIn, Facebook, and website are easily the three easiest. And my phone number and email address are plastered all over that. Direct message, whatever suits, whether it's discussing their own property goals, whether it's just having a financial check in to say, listen, I just want to make sure what I've done is right, or if there's anything else I can be doing here. I do 5 or 6 conversations a week where it's normally just people double checking, and at the end of those it's often going, hey, you're actually in the best position you can be. Rest assured on that front, we can't do anything for you now, but in a couple of years let's have another check in and just see if there's another
And
opportunity to help.
that's free consultation.
Free, absolutely. So every review we do, even up until doing applications to customers, it's all free because
Oh, wow.
ultimately I get paid on business that settles. But even if there's not going to be a deal, I'm not going to tell someone they should refinance or they should change X, Y, and
Yeah,
Z or sell a property just to get myself a deal, because it's not going to get the right outcome and I'll never deal with you again and I'll never refer anyone on to you either.
exactly. You got to give.
Simple.
Well, you're
Do the
just
right
putting
thing and
putting
someone
in
will
the
take
well.
care.
Yeah, 100%. Well, it's been lovely talking to you. We should let you go and talk to some more customers.
Yeah,
And
sounds good.
but I appreciate you spending the time. I mean, it is a tricky area, and I think people just looking for someone to trust.
Yeah,
And I mean, I trust you. I'm going to you with my advice. So, or getting you to help me with things. I look forward to working with you, but also speaking with you again. So, thanks for your time.
same goes, Andrew. Thank you very much. Have a great day.